Hello, I'm Cinemod470. With Spider-Man Brand New Day coming out next year, I thought I'd take a look back on the Home trilogy that brought the webhead into the MCU. I've already posted my video on Homecoming, so feel free to check it out first if you haven't seen it, as I will be referencing and comparing points I made in that video. And if you like what I do, subscribe if you haven't. It costs you nothing, but to me it means everything. While Homecoming was presented as a modern high school drama merged with a superhero movie, Far From Home is a European vacation movie with a mixing of a superhero movie, a spy movie, and a con artist movie. Though only two and a half of those genres work in the movie, the vacation part of Far From Home works because it's a good backdrop to grow the budding romance between Peter and MJ, and all the returning actors have really hit their stride playing their characters, so it's fun seeing them outside their natural environment. And the con artist part perfectly synergizes with Mysterio being this charlatan hero, while also challenging both Spider-Man's and the spectator's perception of reality. However, the spy section is pretty superficial since Fury and his team are mainly present to provide exposition, and the spy aspect gets overshadowed by the supernatural elements. Now, when it comes to the superhero part of Far From Home, I'd say it's an even split. Following the major movie event that was Endgame, Far From Home caps off Phase 3 by showing a post-blip world and how it reacted to the deaths of several of their heroes. Because of half the population being dead for 5 years and returning suddenly, billions of people were without homes. And though those billions returned like nothing happened, the other half had gotten older. There's also a present reverence for Tony's sacrifice, as there are murals in most of the locations the movie visits. But his death also creates a clear fear in the populace, as there is a void in Earth's defense, and everyone wants answers on what the Avengers are doing to keep them safe, or if someone else will take Tony's place. Which leads us to the major plot thread of Far From Home, Edith, an AI Tony built that would give the user access to Stark Industries' security network, global satellites, and an army of drones. And it's left for Peter so he can become the next Iron Man. But since he feels overwhelmed by the concept of taking over for Tony, Mysterio manages to trick Peter into giving him access to Edith. Peter later realizes his mistake, and the climax of the movie is an epic battle where he fights through the drones to get Edith back. Now, as much as I appreciate the idea of Tony leaving a safeguard in place in case he died, I don't like Edith as a plot thread, because Edith's existence causes issues with both the film's narrative and the universe's continuity, and the whole plot can be undone due to key characters being omitted from it. In terms of continuity, when did Tony have the time to set up Peter receiving Edith? I know that Tony knew he might not return from the time travel adventure to bring back the dead half of the population, so I'm sure that he would have had Edith as a contingency, but Peter was still dead at the time. So, did Tony arrange for Peter to get Edith after they snapped back the population and before Thanos bombarded the base? Or did he have it set up so Edith would be sent to Peter if he came back to life? Which then leads into another problem: why did Peter inherit Edith? I'm not denying that Peter and Tony had a heartfelt relationship, but I feel like Far From Home is blowing it out of proportion. This is their timeline. They met, Tony finds out why Peter is a superhero, they went to Germany to fight Captain America, went back to Queens, 2 months pass with zero contact, Tony saves Peter from drowning in a lake via remote control, takes away his suit after the Staten Island ferry was split in half. Then after Peter stops the Vulture, though Tony gives him a place in the Avengers, he still says that Peter needs more mentoring, and Peter declines his invitation. Then, somewhere between 1 to 2 years pass, Infinity War happens, Peter joins the fight in space against Tony's wishes, and he dies. 5 years later, Peter comes back, they have a heartfelt reunion, and then Tony dies. Though this moment in Endgame is what set their relationship, I believe for Peter to inherit Edith, there needed to be more time between the reunion and Tony's death. Especially since in Civil War, Homecoming, and Infinity War, though Tony respected Peter's abilities and intelligence, he consistently wanted Peter to not punch above his weight class, because Tony would and did feel responsible for Peter's death. And yet, for some reason, almost everyone in Far From Home believes it's a good idea for Peter to become the next Iron Man.
Stark chose you. He made you an Avenger. I need that. The world needs that.
I know that 3 of the Avengers died and 1 retired, but there are characters who are both alive and more seasoned than Peter who could be trusted with Edith, like Rhodey and Pepper. You know, 2 people who have their own iron suits and knew Tony since before he became Iron Man. Not to mention that Pepper is in charge of Stark Industries and Rhodey is an Air Force colonel. If Tony would trust anyone with an AI that could hack anything and launch lethal drones from space, it'd be them. I'm not saying Peter wouldn't be on the list, but I doubt he would be at the top. At least not the version of Peter that's portrayed in the Home trilogy at this point. I think the most he would get would be a workstation where he could build his gear and suits. And while we're on the subject on who should have Edith, Tony's whole deal was that he wanted to stop people from abusing his technology. But he didn't have any safeguards in place to lock out known individuals who would abuse Edith's power. And Quentin Beck wasn't just a random nobody. He was a former Stark employee who was fired for being unstable. He would most definitely be on that no-access list that should be in place. And finally, despite Edith's importance to the narrative, after this movie, she is never used again. The most useful and dangerous tool ever created that is presented as Tony's legacy just vanishes after Far From Home, at least to my knowledge. However, the final fight with Edith is pretty well done. The action utilizes Spider-Man's agility, powers, tools, and intelligence for him to succeed. He skydives in from a plane and uses his web wings to glide into the illusion to disable it. As the drones are closing in, he's using his webbing to trap them in between the gaps on the bridge. And when he runs out of webs, he uses the Tower Bridge sign as a bulletproof shield and a drone core as a grenade. On the follow-through, he uses the sign to launch himself from a malfunctioning drone's concussive attack. And after Quentin uses his illusions as a last line of defense, Peter relies on his spider sense to fight through them. And this walkway sequence is probably the second best action scene in the Home trilogy, where everything goes black except for the green smoke on the ground. The atmosphere is silent except for Spider-Man's breathing, and he shuts his eyes and lets his spider sense direct him.
Come on, Peter Tingle.
And as each drone goes down, the illusion breaks apart, and Spidey is triumphant. And while all this is happening, Quentin is hunting Peter's friends with the drones to ensure there isn't any witnesses to expose him, giving the conflict a ticking clock and a real sense of tension, as Peter's life isn't the only one on the line. So, as much as I hate Edith's existence in the narrative, I can't deny that the movie uses her effectively in the climax. In my Homecoming video, I said it was a good movie but a bad Spider-Man adaptation due to how different the characters are from their source material. Especially Peter, since Uncle Ben was absent and his motivation for fighting crime was becoming an Avenger. And since Iron Man was set up to be Peter's mentor and gave him his upgraded spider suit, he appeared less like Spider-Man and more like Iron Boy. But in Homecoming it worked because Peter's character arc was realizing that he didn't need the Stark suit to be effective. But in Far From Home, the plot with Edith being given to Peter and everyone pushing him to become the next Iron Man compounds the Iron Boy criticism. And even though Far From Home is about Peter realizing how flawed Tony was so he can learn to become his own hero despite his personal shortcomings and move out of Tony's shadow, there is an argument to be made that he's still Iron Boy. Since the suit he makes for the final battle is made with Stark tech, there's a reference to the scene from Iron Man when Tony built his second suit, and Back in Black is playing in the background.
Oh, I love Led Zeppelin!
And it becomes increasingly obvious that Peter's character in the Home trilogy is more in line with Miles Morales. I mean, just look at who his best friend is.
Can you spit venom? No. Plus, how are your spider?
Don't get me wrong, Miles is a cool character and lives up to the mantle of Spider-Man, but his character traits don't line up with Peter since those traits are dependent on there being a Spider-Man before him. It's like if I watched a Batman movie and Bruce Wayne acted like Terry McGinnis. I like Terry McGinnis, but I like him because of how his personality contrasts against Bruce. As Bruce started his superhero journey as a boy and had to build the persona of Batman by his perception of what Gotham needed, whereas Terry started as a teenager with a more defined personality and learned how to be Batman from Bruce. So even though they both carry the mantle of Batman, they handle it in different ways. And with Peter's personality and motivation being solidified at this point with his previous incarnations, him acting like Miles just feels wrong. And it's even worse since for this movie, Peter starts off with Miles' character arc, where he started out not wanting to fight crime and left it all for more experienced heroes to deal with. So for the first hour of Far From Home, the part of Peter's brain that controls his responsibility is shut off. Sure, he addresses how if Peter Parker disappears from the trip and Spider-Man appears in Europe, his classmates will work out his identity. But for the most part, he just wants to continue his vacation despite being told that the world could end, and gives Edith to a guy he's known for 2 days, which is not how Peter Parker should act.
You can't be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man if there's no neighborhood.
One possible explanation for this 180 is due to Peter reacting to the events of Endgame, where he came back from the dead, fought an army of aliens, and watched his mentor die. But that isn't what's presented. Sure, Peter's upset about Tony being gone, but the movie is very consistent about Peter's main issue being the idea of taking over for him.
What is it like to take over from Tony Stark?
There's some big shoes to fill. Stark chose you. He made you an Avenger. I need that. The world needs that. Maybe Stark was wrong. Was he?
The whole world is asking who's gonna be the next Iron Man. I don't know if that's me happy. I'm not Iron Man.
When it comes to combating giant elemental monsters, Peter doesn't have this reaction. Honestly, I think it would have been better if, after Tony's death, Peter hyperfixated on being Spider-Man to the point of him risking a burnout. So Ned and May encourage him to go on the trip to Europe to get some self-care and recharge, even discouraging him from taking his suit. But Peter takes it anyway because he feels compelled to be Spider-Man. And when Fury shows up to recruit him to fight the elementals, he jumps on it immediately. This way Peter still has agency throughout the movie, resembles his comic book counterpart, and isn't forced to help people. Now, when discussing previous Spider-Man properties, I've remarked on how my favourite aspect of those versions is that he has a spine, that he has strong convictions and doesn't fold when challenged. But for the first hour of the movie, Peter appears rather timid. The best example is when Fury chastises Peter after he accidentally used Edith to send a drone after Brad, Pete's romantic rival for MJ. It's supposed to illustrate how Peter is still inexperienced and probably shouldn't have Edith, while also strengthening his relationship with Mysterio, as he's the only one trying to empathize with Peter and even points out how Fury hijacked Peter's trip and put his friends in danger. Now, whenever I watch this scene, I'm reminded of a moment from the Ultimate Spider-Man comic where Daredevil and a group of other superheroes are planning on killing the Kingpin, but Spider-Man is the only one who says they shouldn't because heroes should stand for something loftier. And there's this one panel where Spider-Man's the shortest and youngest character present, and he says to Daredevil that if he tries to kill the Kingpin or show up at Peter's school, he'll take him down. And mind you, this version of Peter has only been Spider-Man for a few months, but that is the template for who Peter Parker should be. That being young doesn't mean he won't man up and throw down when he knows the other guy's wrong. And in this scene, Nick is in the wrong, because to get Peter to Prague to fight the last elemental, he had to arrange the school trip to come with them to the site of a monster attack. And at no point did Nicky tell Peter that Edith had access to lethal drones or even tell him how it worked. And that whole drone strike against Brad wouldn't have happened in the first place if Nick's agent properly secured the area. But I'll explain that part later. At first, I thought Peter's timid nature was also due to the trauma of Infinity War and Endgame, but again, the only times Peter is consistently stressed is when faced with the prospect of taking over for Tony. Plus, he's got no problem fighting giant monsters, and after finding out about Mysterio's deception, he locks in for the rest of the movie. And considering Peter's history since Civil War, where he battled against multiple Avengers, was buried under a collapsed building and had to use all of his strength to push the rubble off him, and fought against multiple aliens, one of whom was Thanos, he should be confident enough to stand up for himself. Don't get me wrong, Peter is written to be aware of his flaws and mistakes, and when Peter locks in, he really locks in. He immediately realizes that Quentin can use Edith to track his phone, so he has to be clever in how he communicates with other people. When he's putting his suit together for the final fight, he modifies his taser webs to disable the drones. And in the Tower Bridge, he relies solely on his spider sense to fight through Mysterio's illusions. But as much as I like the second half of Peter's screen time, the first half is hard to watch because of his timid and irresponsible characterization. And the only reason I was able to tolerate the first hour was because of his scenes with MJ. And speaking of MJ, as much as I've criticized the Home trilogy so far for its inaccuracies, its version of MJ is a great substitute. Because even though Michelle Jones isn't that faithful to Mary Jane Watson, she's entertaining and three-dimensional. She's blunt, honest, and passionate about her unique interests even though they might appear unappealing to other people. But she's also using her blunt personality to cover her insecurities, and her excessive need to tell the truth can upset people. And honestly, MJ's unique personality bouncing off Peter makes her a better love interest than Liz from Homecoming. I didn't really talk all that much about Liz in my last video, which, you know what, that's on me. But now that I am, she was okay. There wasn't anything that made me hate Liz, but there wasn't anything about her character that made me sad about her and Peter not getting together, because a great deal of her intrigue came from her being the Vulture's daughter. Without him, she's pretty forgettable. With MJ, however, I was genuinely rooting for her and Peter to get together due to their fun and awkward chemistry.
I'm not ready for this trip to be over yet, and I kind of want to do something fun that's not on the itinerary or planned or with Mr. Harrington.
Yes.
Yes, like you want to go?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. I'll see you outside in 10 minutes.
Meet me outside in 5 minutes.
5 is good.
Okay.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
The only thing I'd change about their relationship is instead of Peter already being in love with MJ and working up the courage to confess his feelings, their feelings for each other build over the trip. That way it would feel more natural, since the last time we saw Peter and MJ before this movie, they didn't really show that many signs of being interested in each other. I know that a lot of time has passed between the two movies, but actually seeing them gradually fall in love with each other is more satisfying than watching a rehash of Homecoming where Peter has a crush on a girl and spends most of the movie trying to work up the courage to ask her out. That being said, MJ is a good standard to set when creating a superhero's love interest, as her character doesn't just revolve around Peter and gives off the impression of having a life outside of the plot. And I appreciate that due to her inquisitive nature and her crush on Peter, she was able to figure out he was Spider-Man. And her statement about watching him ties back to Homecoming, as there are small clips of her glancing at Peter at key moments where his two lives are colliding. Now, even though there are clear differences between Michelle and Mary Jane's personalities, as Michelle is very deadpan and Mary Jane is very flirtatious, there is some connective tissue between the two versions. What made Mary Jane so popular was that her flirtatious personality and desire to avoid having an exclusive relationship was different from the norm of female characters in the late 60s. So Michelle can be argued to be a good modern MJ, because though they are different people, her blunt personality and interest in morbid subjects also makes her an outlier to other female characters at the time of her debut. And like Mary Jane, Michelle's personality is used to mask her insecurities. Moving on to the rest of the side characters, Far From Home fixes a criticism I had back in Homecoming about how Ned felt like he didn't have a life that didn't revolve around Peter. But he does here because of his surprise relationship with Betty that begins and ends without Peter's knowledge. And their cute, unfiltered relationship works best when it's juxtaposed against Peter and MJ being awkward around each other and still keeping their feelings bottled up. And because Far From Home is a more personal story, the spectators are shown how the blip affected regular people through the side characters. Like how Brad Davis was originally 12 years old, but now everyone who returns see him as a young man. And how May's job at the Salvation Army is working to house those who lost their homes after they were dead for 5 years. Though, while we're on the topic of May, why is she okay with Peter being Spider-Man? Especially since in Homecoming, May is constantly worried for Peter's safety, and that was why he didn't tell her the truth. Yet in Far From Home, she encourages Peter to be Spider-Man, and even packs his suit when he's on vacation. Which leads me back to the comics, as one of the biggest Spider-Man moments from the last 30 years was the conversation, where May finds out the truth, and Peter tells her everything about how he got his powers and how he felt responsible for Ben dying. The story was so good they did it again in Ultimate Spider-Man 5 years later, and I wish we could have had the conversation on screen, since we would have had an explanation for May's heel turn, and it's the first time an on-screen Aunt May has found out Peter's secret. It just feels like a wasted opportunity. When it comes to Nick Fury and his spy team, they're mostly just there to talk exposition, stare at the giant elementals, and give Peter a hard time for ghosting him and not stepping up to replace Tony. And the real reason Fury puts all this pressure on Peter is to make Mysterio look better by just being kind and understanding. So Fury's importance to Far From Home's plot is only to help sell Mysterio's lie, since he bought it hook, line, and sinker.
Only because I had serious doubts about Beck from the beginning.
Not true, he had zero doubts.
But super spy Nick Fury being tricked by Mysterio would have volatile consequences, as it would damage his reputation. So it's revealed in the post-credit scene that he's actually Talos from Captain Marvel. So Nick's character is safe, at least until Secret Invasion. But it's still really messed up that a Skrull general whose whole deal is deceiving people fell for Mysterio's lie without even making a background check to see if the name Quentin Beck came up. It's just mind-boggling. I mean, it'd be one thing if someone on Beck's team managed to erase his existence on the internet, but Talos himself states that he just fell for it.
How was I supposed to know that the whole thing was fake? I mean, that was all very, very convincing, you know, the performances, the illusion, that costume, the craftsmanship and that. I mean, this is just embarrassing for a shapeshifter.
And Talos' incompetence is passed down to his subordinates, which is best shown when Peter is delivered his stealth suit, so when he's in the field, people won't know Spider-Man and Peter Parker are in the same country at the same time. Since the class is still on a European trip, they deliver the suit while at a rest stop, and MCU humor takes over. A female agent tells Peter to take off his clothes in front of her to see if the suit fits. Brad walks in on them while Peter's pants are down and takes a photo of him. And then the agent pulls a gun on Brad after he leaves. And from there, Peter tries using Edith to erase the photo, but accidentally sends a drone after him. Okay, first of all, not okay for an adult to tell a teenager to get undressed in front of them, no matter what their genders are. Why not just have Peter get changed somewhere private, like the other room back there? Secondly, did this woman not make sure the area was secure? Did she not think to lock the door after Peter closed it? Or hell, just have a guy standing guard to keep everyone out. And after they're discovered and have their photo taken, the first thing she does is take her gun out. And it wasn't even a tranq gun. Was she seriously about to shoot a teenage boy? And the gun didn't even have a suppressor, so if she did shoot Brad, everyone would hear it. This is probably the ineptest spy I've ever seen. Now, one possibility for why she acts this way is because she's a Skrull and doesn't understand human social norms, but that makes even less sense since Skrulls are a shape-shifting species who infiltrate planets. I mean, infiltration is literally coded into their DNA. This whole scene is someone who shouldn't be stupid acting stupid, so Peter can literally be caught with his pants down and the audience can get a laugh. But the scene becomes less funny when you realize it exists to cause the later confrontation between Peter and Fury and make Peter believe he's unqualified for owning Edith, so he'll give it to Mysterio. But the whole situation and the conflict in the second half of the movie could have been avoided if Talos and his crew acted smarter. But they have to act dumb so the climax can happen, and Mysterio can reveal Peter's identity to the world, which causes every bad thing that happens to Peter in No Way Home. The reason this whole thing annoys me is because Talos doesn't really acknowledge the gravity of his blunder, and it's best illustrated both after the battle in London where he's trying to save face with Happy, and after the cliffhanger where Peter's identity is revealed, where Talos is just acting casual about his mistake, thinking all's well that ends well. The only way this level of incompetence would have been passable narratively is if Peter had a chance to really lay into Fury, because throughout the movie, he's been giving Peter a hard time for not living up to Tony's legacy and avoiding responsibility. So it would have been really cathartic for Fury to get chastised for his negligence that allowed Mysterio to cause so much damage. I know that Talos is dead, but the real Nick Fury is still around, and I hope eventually Peter gets the chance to read him the riot act, because he deserves it. But anyway, let's close this off with something positive. In the lead up to Far From Home's premiere, there was a constant media buzz about Mysterio totally for real being a good guy in the movie. I don't know the exact number of people who believed it, but I have to admit, Jake Gyllenhaal gave a convincing performance as a good guy. So good that back in the day when I first watched the movie, I didn't want him to be a villain. And there's clear in-universe details added to Mysterio's persona to give off the impression of a superhero. The Doctor Strange pose, the Asgardian-style costume, and the Captain America backstory about a man who lost his world and is trying to save the one he's stuck in. And though I've criticized Peter's character in the first hour of the movie, it does work well with Quentin's deception as he's stepping into the vacant mentor position left by Tony's death, and thus endears him to the spectators. And Gyllenhaal's range really shines through after Quentin's deception is revealed, as we get to see him as a charismatic con artist, a calm sociopath, and finally an unhinged supervillain. The CGI scenes where his illusions mess with reality are well made, and really show how cunning Quentin is, because he uses not only over-the-top inception imagery, but also subtle illusions, so neither Spider-Man nor the spectators know what's real. In fact, those more subtle illusions work so well because they follow the over-the-top ones. Because of Spider-Man surviving or fighting through them, we assume the illusion is over, but really there's one more, whether it's Quentin impersonating Fury or hiding completely cloaked. I also appreciate that the narrative utilizes Spider-Man's spider sense as a counter to Mysterio's illusions, especially since in Homecoming, that aspect of his powers wasn't really addressed. In order to properly sell the lie of Mysterio and the Elementals, instead of being a single guy, Mysterio is a team of former Stark employees who handle different aspects of the scheme. Like with this guy from that Iron Man scene, manning the drones, projecting the illusions, and creating the damage. And another guy who created Mysterio's backstory and how the Elementals work. And you can even spot some of the team members before the Elemental attack. And though it's impressive that the writers managed to tie Quentin and his illusion tech to a throwaway line from Civil War, the team feels like a rehash of Vulture's crew from Homecoming, especially since they're all united by their hatred of Tony Stark, which really ramps up that Iron Boy criticism. And honestly, it's worse here. Though Adrian's origin is tied to Tony, he had a present rivalry with Spider-Man, as he is constantly interfering with Adrian's business, and they have a personal connection through his daughter. Whereas with Mysterio, the entire conflict is tied to Tony, as both he and Spider-Man are fighting over Edith, which is represented as Tony's legacy and who will be his replacement. I think it would have been better if instead, Mysterio got his tech from the Vulture's arms deals, or was even one of the crew members that we didn't see. That way it ties back to Homecoming's plot, since the crew was selling weapons for years, and it keeps Mysterio's antagonism focused solely on Spider-Man. I also would have liked to have seen more conflict within Mysterio's crew. You see, the reason they're working with Quentin is because, like him, they want recognition for their work after being sidelined by superheroes. And with so many heroes being dead, it's the perfect time for Mysterio to take center stage. But none of them show any hesitation or issue with the massive casualties and destruction that will occur in London, or have any second thoughts after Quentin threatens to shoot them with drones when one of them leaves evidence at the last Elemental attack. It made sense that everyone who worked with Vulture was okay if people died since they were arms dealers, and they continued working with him after he killed one of their members because the movie stated that several of them had families to provide for, and the guy he killed risked exposing them. But since this crew's motivation is recognition, they feel very flimsy as characters due to them continuing to follow Quentin's orders even after he becomes more unhinged and dies.
Make sure every drone is weapons hot. We need maximum damage.
It's gonna cause a lot of casualties.
The kids are in the kill zone.
But even though Mysterio died, he did win, as his followers posted a video he made during the final battle making Spider-Man appear responsible for the drone attack in London, and Mysterio looked like a hero. And for good measure, he outs Spider-Man's identity, following through on that subtle illusion trick I talked about earlier, where both Spider-Man and the spectators think it's over after the climactic battle ends and Edith confirms Quentin is dead. But there's still one more trick in play. And the mid-credits scene hits so hard because now, Peter's in a place we've never seen on screen before. His identity is out. Far From Home does successfully act as a good follow-up of Endgame due to it incorporating the consequences of that movie into its narrative. And though I feel like Mysterio's crew was a little underbaked, Mysterio himself was perfect. He felt tied to the universe in a very real way, and Gyllenhaal's performance manages to sell the lie of an interdimensional hero, and the true unhinged madness that lies beneath. Though, unfortunately for him to be so effective, characters who should excel at deception are easily deceived. And though Far From Home ramps up the complaints I had with Spider-Man from Homecoming, it makes up for it with impressive action and a great romance with a well-developed love interest. And I can't deny that the ending made me want to see more. But what do you guys think? Comment down below. Did you like the movie? Did you hate it? Did you like some of it and hate the rest? Do you think I should stop making comparisons to the comics? Because I'm telling you right now... that's never gonna happen.